I'm Emily Vrain and I'm a postdoc researcher at UEA. And for the past few years, I've been part of a research project that's been looking at lots of different technologies that can help us improve our energy use. And in this short video, I'm going to focus on one of the innovations that we've been looking at that can help us improve how we get around. First of all, I just want to talk about the current situation. And so if we think about most households, especially in the developed world, they have or have access to a vehicle, a car, usually fueled by fossil fuels. Now, there's huge problems with this, as I'm sure you're all aware. But for example, for every 10 people in Europe, 6 own a car. And so this is a high consumption of fossil fuel vehicles. So not only does it cost in terms of the use of energy to actually build the vehicles and the raw materials needed, but a lot of the ways that we use our cars at the moment is highly inefficient. So you can imagine a lot of single occupant vehicles commuting to work, and then a lot of the time they're just sitting idle. So they're just on someone's driveway or at a car park at a workplace. And so there's huge rooms for improvement on how we use our vehicles, but then also obviously new technologies such as electric vehicles and so on that can help us actually reduce the need for fossil fuels in the first place. So the first scenario I'd like to paint a picture of for you is one that's been studied by a group of researchers in Portugal. And so they took the city of Lisbon and asked the question, what happens if we get rid of all the privately owned vehicles in the city and we replace them with a shared on-demand sort of platform of vehicles that can still provide the same amount of journeys for people from getting from A to B. And they asked what percentage of the vehicle fleet of today would be required to still provide that same amount of journeys. It was 3%, and so that just shows how inefficient our current uses of vehicles are. And so what they found was that congestion completely disappeared, that obviously there's no need for car parking spaces in the city centre because cars are just continuously being used for dropping people off and collecting them. And so there was 95% savings in car parking spaces, which obviously have the knock-on effect of being able to provide more green spaces or better infrastructure for pedestrians or cycle lanes, etc. They also found obviously then air quality improved. But one thing was that they noticed vehicles were used 10 times more in terms of the kilometres that they all do. So because they're not sitting idle as much, they're using 10 times more kilometres than they would normally. And so this ends up in the life cycle of a single vehicle being much shorter, and so there's a higher turnover within the fleet. And this is actually a beneficial thing because if new technologies are being invented, this new technology enters the system much quicker than say at the moment we have a few chitty chitty bang bangs knocking around waiting for them to die before someone replaces their car. But if you have this higher turnover of a fleet, you can introduce better technologies and cleaner technologies much quicker. So there's obviously a huge range of benefits from having this type of shared on-demand platform. For any of you familiar with Uber Pool, it's that sort of business model of clever algorithms behind an app where if you want a journey, you just put where you want to go and where from, and a vehicle will come and collect you, and it will most likely be with other occupants going in the same direction. So this has got a huge potential in terms of improving a lot of, not just vehicle and less energy demand, but in terms of health, obviously people less stress, not being stuck in congestion in the peak hours. But they were a long way off from actually having this in any city centres. So some cities are providing such services, and it's just starting to take off. As I said, the Uber Pool, which some of you may be familiar with, it's more popular over in America. But obviously there are barriers to this, and especially during times like COVID, it's not exactly the best idea to get in a shared vehicle with lots of other strangers for every journey that you need to take. And so beyond sort of COVID times, one of our researchers, Laurie Kerr, has been looking at what it is that's needed to try and encourage more use of shared vehicles. And so she's been focusing on ride sharing as a whole, and sort of different workplaces have been offering a platform for their employees to be able to share their commuter journeys. And so she's done a lot of work with surveying and interviewing with focus groups of these types of employees that actually use the service, and what are the barriers that they think for other people to use them, and then what was it that persuaded them to use them. And one of the main things that she found was that trust is one of the biggest factors in determining whether someone uses it. So if they're a lot more trustworthy, they trust other people. You need not only trust in the platform that it's going to work, but also obviously with the other users. And as someone said in one of the interviews, it's good to know that you're not going to get into a car with an axe murderer if they're working at the same office to me. So you can see how this sort of platform works well in a working situation, a workplace, with the same employees all going to the same destination. But it's obviously a lot more tricky to try and encourage these types of journeys with complete strangers. And so there's a lot of work is needed to try and help improve people's perception of trust within these platforms. And so that's just one way that we can help improve how we get around and lead to a more sustainable energy future. Now, there's a few other different smart mobility and technologies that we've been looking at. And so if you're interested, take a look at the SILCI website for more information. Okay, thanks for listening. Have a good day.